Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Brian
Good afternoon, RJ.
Brinkman. How are you?
I'm good. It's been a while.
It's been a while. It's been a while.
I haven't I haven't sat in front of this microphone to talk about music and controversial opinions and fish and CBD in so long. I've almost forgotten how to do it. But we'll see. Maybe today I can do it. Well, I don't know.
Well, we're gonna get back to it. We are here. This is the Helping Friendly podcast. We are a podcast about the band Fish from Vermont originally, now Fish of the World. We are going to talk about summer 2022, and we had a it's sort of like the playoffs, Brian, when you have your starting pitcher all set up for game 1 of the NLDS, and then they come down with something. And that happened to us today. But luckily we didn't have to bring in a reliever or anyone to start. We didn't have to switch things around and bring in our right fielder to pitch. We're going to bring in another pitcher, Mr. Ryan Storm.
We somehow made things work out where we could trade for a pitcher before game 1 of the playoffs. I don't know how it happens. He's from a different team, but yeah, Mr.
There's
Ryan
no trade
Storm is.
deadline. It's pretty cool. There's no players association to deal with. It's just a couple of us here. But anyway, Ryan's going to join us in a minute. Brian, how are you? How are you doing?
I'm good. We had a really busy summer. We covered a lot of fish. We listened to a lot of fish. I spent a lot of August traveling. Went back to the Midwest. We did an event. I saw some fish at Alpine. Came back. I had like a 4-week blitz of my wife's birthday, our anniversary, Dick's, my son's birthday, and now I'm like coasting for about 3 weeks. So I feel like everything went crazy for like 4 or 5 weeks, and now things are calmed down, and I can like actually sit down and listen to new albums, and I can watch a baseball game again. It's all really good right now.
That's great. Do you feel like a stranger to this podcast?
A little bit. I'm
Yeah.
like, hey, old friend, we hung out for a
Yeah.
while, but then we, parted ways, and now we're trying to figure ourselves out again. How are you? I know you've had a crazy couple of weeks as
Yeah.
well.
I wonder if most people are feeling this way. I had a 11 or 12 day trip with my family. We went up to New Jersey, then New Hampshire, then Boston, and flew from Boston to Portland, Oregon. Spent a week there for my brother-in-law's wedding, and it was great. But we got back Monday night, and then Tuesday morning, it was my oldest daughter's birthday, and then the same day she started 4th grade, and our twins started kindergarten. So we got them all on the same bus for the first time, and then had a birthday party last night, and now it's like the first regular day, except we're going to see Pearl Jam tonight.
Oh my God. That's going to be
Yeah,
incredible.
that's it. That buried the lead. So we should bring Ryan on. But I do want to say first, I've been doing interviews for Undermine season 4, which is starting on Monday, and it's going to be about the path, the road to 1997, the road to fall 97, and we did our first 2 interviews. I just finished an interview with Amy Skelton, and we're talking about 25 key shows that Brian selected with some input. But if you like them, give the credit to him, but also blame him if you don't. 25 shows from the 90s, and then we're going to cover every show of Fall 97 on Undermine. Tom's the host. Benji, and I are going to rotate co-hosts, and then we're going to have an amazing guest who is at the show we're talking about. So you'll never guess which show Amy Skelton was talking to us about, but you'll find out next week. That was episode 2. Episode 1, we have an amazing guest as well, someone was very close to the band for a very long time. Also, next Sunday, September 25th, we are going to be at Nectar's. I don't know, Brian, have you heard of Nectar's?
I feel like it's the type of place that you play and then like is immortalized. Like every
Yep.
band should have a Nectar's. I think there's one band that has a Nectar's, but I don't know
Yeah.
exactly. Can you connect the dots for me?
It's the spot you go to before you start playing the front, you know?
That's it. Okay.
That's how it goes.
Interesting.
We're going to be doing a tribute celebrating the 25 years of Water Wheel. We're going to have interviews. We're going to have a bunch of music. We're going to have special guests. It's going to be incredible. I'm really excited about it. And you can check out Nectar's if you think you can make it up to Burlington, or if you're in Burlington. We will figure out a way to get this content to everyone in real time, I think, or after the event. So I just want to tell you about that. But should we bring Ryan in so we can start talking about summer 2022?
Let's bring him in. Ryan
Hi.
Storm.
Hey, Ryan.
How are you?
Hello. I'm fantastic. Very happy to be on. Thank you for having me.
It's nice.
We're excited to have you back here.
It's been a little while, but you were actually on a recent episode where there were a bunch of us, and we were all just so enthused that we had to continue the conversation.
Yeah. This is my first one for my new office too.
I like it. It's looking good.
Backdrop. Thank you.
Got some. Not only do you have some concert art back there, you have some podcast art as well. That's cool.
Yes. Storm sound.
See, that's amazing. Yeah. That's something that like we would never think about doing because I don't know that we're as smart as you, Ryan. So thank you for the idea. Maybe I need like a big HFPod logo behind me here.
Just put an Osiris, like cover the whole wall behind you with the Osiris logo.
All right, I'm gonna do that right when we're done with this.
Or a picture of your head and Tom's head.
That would be so strange. All right, so we're going to get into this. We're going to talk about some themes and takeaways that we each have from Summer Tour, and then we're going to each recommend 2 shows from Summer Tour. Before we do that, I have to say that we are sponsored by Section 119. We have a lot going on with Section 119. They actually, I think it's okay for me to say that they just put together some special merch for the Water Wheel 25th anniversary. I just saw the final designs. They're going to be on sale, I think, at the end of this week on the website, and then they'll be on sale throughout the fall and in person in Burlington. But anyway, they're the premier apparel brand where many fans shop to represent their favorite band in everyday life. I have a bunch of Section 119 gear, and I wear it often. It's super comfortable, and I wore my new Bolt hoodie on the plane out to Oregon and back, and I got some comments. I got some comments on it. It's a good way to say I'm a Dead fan without having like a tattoo on your arm or something, But we love Section 119, and if you go to section119.com, use the code summer22 for a 20% discount on your next purchase. You should check them out. We have a lot more stuff cooking with them, but I think that's where I'll leave it. You guys should check them out. They're amazing. They're huge fans, and they're doing a great job bringing a lot of really comfortable and amazing clothing to the community. Okay, so Brian, what do we need to know before we jump in? Because I'm just gonna start talking about summer 2022. But what do we need to know first?
I think contextually, it's just important to note that whereas summer 2021 was defined and 2021 as a whole was defined by this kind of yearning that we all had after 18 months with no Phish, 18 months for most of us with no concerts. The band came back and I think shocked a lot of fans throughout last summer. I think the general consensus going into last summer was, I don't really want to think critically about this. I just want to be happy the band is back. And then they came back and played a 33-minute version of Tweezer 4 shows in, and that kind of defined where they were going forward. Beyond that, the fall tour, I'm going to get the hyperbole train going just right off the bat. I think the fall tour was their best tour since 1997. That followed immediately after an absolutely incredible Trey survival tour. Obviously, Omicron strikes in winter. We lose the full New Year's Eve run. The band plays an isolated New Year's Eve show that kind of felt more like a symbolic moment of those 4 guys rather than a concert. And then they come back in 2022. We've covered this at length, but we get 4 shows in Mexico, 4 shows for the faux New Year's Eve run, and 8 shows for spring tour, all leading up to the band playing a full summer tour. So we got this full slate, basically half a tour in the first half of 2022 that gave us an opportunity to kind of get a sense of what does 2021 feel like if you extend that sound a little bit more and hear the band starting to evolve.
I was prepared to disagree with everything that Brian was going to say on this podcast today, but I do agree with his take there about fall 2021 being the best tour in like 25 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Even like even though it was like really exciting for me seeing 3 shows that were like amazing, like it's just an incredible tour. And 2021 as a whole, yeah, your point about like, you know, coming back and just being happy that the band is playing again, like we're at concerts again, and yeah, they just absolutely, you know, exceeded expectations. Like we're so on it, you know, immediately.
Yeah. That's interesting. I mean, I saw a couple shows last. I mean, it's an amazing tour. Amazing. Yeah, that's really interesting. Well, I have kind of a theme that I want to introduce, but maybe I'll wait a little bit because it does relate to this. But I guess I'll just ask the question: do you think that in 2022 they lost a little bit of the edge that 2021 had? Like you guys talked about coming out in 2021 and being aggressive and being, I think everyone was feeling a little bit on edge, which I think benefited, the music benefited from that. Just kind of like not not ever letting their foot off the gas. Do you guys see 2022 as different from that, or possibly suffering from a lack of that?
I would say
That's a leading
definitely.
question.
Yeah, that's good. They definitely did lose a little bit of that edge, but I think that's normal for Fish to do. I think they have a peak year like that, and we've seen many times where the next year they kind of take a step back, they evaluate where they are, they try to expand on it, so they're not just doing the same thing again this year. Because I feel like they very well could have, but at this point in their career, they don't want to just sit on their laurels and do the same thing for multiple years in a row. They're looking for a new direction. And so, you know, you look at Mexico from the beginning of this year, and it's still an extension of 2021, pretty much. Like those shows could very easily fit into 2021. But then by the time you get to MSG and Spring Tour, you can see that it's kind of shifting a little bit. You still have some of that 2021 stuff, but then, you know, you have that 2022 kind of show format style really coming up in Spring Tour, where you have a show where there's like one big jam or one or two really big jams, and the rest of the show, you know, isn't much to write home about. And I think that's a hallmark of, you know, you look at summer 2019 or summer 2018, similar kind of thing, where they're kind of, um, you know, taking a step back, evaluating, trying to go in new directions, and maybe that results in weird and lopsided set lists in a lot of cases. I would say this year was better than summer 2019 and 2018 by a wide margin. I think the improv that we got, you know, while it wasn't as plentiful as last year, still absolutely incredible. The highs are just really, really high.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of that. I think you have to like come at it from this sense of Fish is constantly evolving, and that's like one of the hallmarks of listening to this band is whenever they reach a point that you're like, I love the sound that they're in. Most cases, they're kind of thinking about what is next and how to push this forward into a different direction. To me, this year most reminds me of 1998 and 2018, 2 years that I think in hindsight are really strong and contain a lot of boundary pushing music and a lot of exploration, but compared to the years prior, lose a little bit of the edge. And you think about 1997 in the sense of a year that had so much risk taking and so much kind of arrogance and this challenge of this band that said we're completely reshaping our sound, and they found so much success within that reshaping of their sound. 1998, you hear that sound kind of getting softened around the edges a little bit, and the funk leads to ambient jamming that is not nearly as dynamic, but when you listen to it with hindsight, you can really hear the subtleties and you can hear where the band is going in 1999 and 2000. Similarly, the Baker's Dozen was such a massive risk for the band at the time from a structural standpoint, and it led to musical risk taking where they decided we're not going to repeat a single song, and so that leads to this kind of jamming revolution that happens throughout that summer. A real standout year in a lot of people's minds. When they come back in 2018, you still have the jamming, but the jamming gives way to a band that is introducing new songs and is trying to figure out other ways to be creative. I feel like last year they found so much in this very singular sound that was part of the Halloween gag. It was part of new gear that really impacted the band in a positive way. And the easy thing would have been to just come back in 2022 and say, we're just doing what worked then. Song placements don't matter. Jams happen wherever we want to have them in really weird places, some of
And that's
which
still
still
happening to
stayed.
a certain degree, though.
Yeah, some of that still stays, but they're trying new things out. And I think part of it, we'll get into it here. One of your themes, RJ, is the jam lengths kind of shrink a little bit, and we hear the band figuring out ways out of songs into another song rather than extending a specific jam vehicle like we saw a lot throughout 2021 that, fair or not, tends to end up being what I think a lot of fans, really seek out when they listen to Fish. What are your thoughts on all that, RJ? Do you agree? Do you?
Yeah. I think it's all, I've noticed in a lot of these shows, Trey at the end of the show this summer always has been saying like, we love you guys so much. Thank you. I feel like he is at the same place that I am, which is just, I'm always going to be like so happy to go to a show and just like, when I'm there, I don't care what happens at all. But then when you look back at and listen to 20 or 25 shows, then you start to like think about how it compares to other things and how it fits into the broader narrative. So I don't know. I mean, I think, I've heard from people who went to Dick's, like I've heard from several people that was the best Fish I've ever seen. And then I've heard from a lot of people like that was like pretty lackluster. So, this is all subjective, of course, as all art is. But I think, well, I'll just talk about the first theme that you alluded to, Brian, because I think we got into this thing. Jonathan Hart started describing these sort of micro jams. I think that was like 2018, maybe. And that still happens a lot, right? There's 10-minute jams that contain a lot of ideas and a lot of variety and all that. I was looking at the stats, but because I think the length of the jams do matter somewhat. I looked at the jam chart, the 20-minute jam chart. There were 13 20-minute jams in 16 shows at the beginning of the year. So Mexico through spring, Deer Creek. And then there were 13 20-minute jams in 26 shows, which was like Great Woods through Dick's. And no 20-minute jams at Dick's. The closest was the 18-minute You Enjoy Myself on night 2. So, of course, this is like an arbitrary metric, but I think it does show like a willingness to really like be open and vulnerable and follow their muse and allow ideas to develop. I was listening back to the Deer Creek Sand, and there are several times in that where it just starts to kind of dissolve. It's kind of like the Dick's 2012 show that we talked about with Ryan a couple of weeks ago. Like there are these jams where like things are about to stop, and 12 minutes into this Deer Creek Sand, it could go into cross-eyed. Like it's almost like a sure thing that's going to cross-eyed. Instead, they just like keep pushing it forward, and more ideas develop. And same thing with the Down with Disease from Bangor and the Free from Blossom. So I think there was less of that just by these numbers in the summer tour than there was earlier in the year. I think coming off of that fall 2021, like Mexico and then MSG were kind of a continuation. And I guess that's a theme that we have talked about, Brian, like that was a continuation of 2021, and maybe summer is the beginning of 2022, just in terms of how the sound has evolved.
Well, on your point about the number of 2020 or 20-minute jams, I just, did a quick look. What's interesting is that there were only 10 in all of 2019, 3 of which were from Mexico. So between summer and fall 2019, there were 7 20-minute jams that got played. And even in 2018, there were only 12. So are we at like what, 26 this year? Did you say it's the math? Like,
yeah,
that's insane. Even though summer tour proper had less than
the
spring, you're relatively, it looks like there's less. But when you compare it to previous years, it's a ton of 20-minute jams for 1 year.
Yeah,
which
that's
is crazy.
fair.
Which is not something I realized. I was expecting there would be more.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think
I think that's fair.
I,
But I do
I
want to
think that's
say,
fair.
go ahead, Brian.
Well, I was just gonna say, I think part of the challenge, and I was thinking about this as we were preparing for this episode. I thought about this a lot throughout the shows I was at as well. Was if last year hadn't happened, would would I appreciate, like, would I be more blown away by the performance on stage? I think part of it is simply the challenge as a listener of what happened before. And I think, like, it's very hard to make a case that this year was not a that this tour, that this year so far has not been a good year of Fish. I think it's been a really good year of Fish. I think the challenge is just like absorbing that in the moment with how they played a year ago when you were shocked on a consistent basis by the way that the band was playing. And that's something I'll talk about here shortly, is, this idea of going to see Fish. Like, part of the reason I think why so many people go to see Fish is that shocking moment of like, holy crap, I've never seen that before. And I don't think we got a lot of that this year. I think part of what you're saying, RJ, from a length standpoint is, and I want to read something that a friend of mine sent as I was talking about this earlier today with in a text thread, is like the idea that when the band fully focuses and they push beyond, we could go into Cross-Eyed right now, or we could go into Prince Caspian right now, they may find nothing, and 3 minutes later the jam may dissolve into a totally different song. But there's always that opportunity that they're going to find those last 18 minutes of the Shoreline Soul Planet, where music is being made that they have never written before, that they've never played before, and they're playing for you live in the moment. And instead of that, in the latter part of this year, especially throughout summer tour, rather than getting those moments, we got a really nice segue into another song that had a really nice shorter jam that created a really nice segue into another song. All of that's really cool, but it doesn't lead to like the sort of shocking moments that we were getting in 2021 and early
Right.
2022.
Right, and that's also was a common theme that we saw in 2019. Not as many
Right.
longer jams. Instead, we're getting a micro jam with a segue. And actually, this year has the most 20-minute jams in 1 year since 2003, which is kind of crazy to look at. When we're discussing, it feels like there's less. I wonder why it feels like there's so many less, because it's by a significant margin, and we still, there's still assuming at least 4 shows left in the year.
Yeah.
That's a crazy statistic to look at, that this year, not last year, not 2017, not 2015, like it's this year that has the most since 2003. So kind of
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. I mean, I just blame Fish for creating like the greatest improvisational rock band of all time, and now we expect it every time. I mean, it is about, like, I think part of it is just that it felt like from fall 2021 that there was like more there's more room, or there's going to be more like of that trajectory. So I think that's part of it is just those expectations. But yeah, I mean, it's a good point. And I don't know, there's something, I think it's also like when you listen to like that, the Sand from Deer Creek, or any of those like really long, you hear what it's like to create this thing that is really like novel. And I think, I mean, you could argue that all the improv that they do is novel, but I think there's something like very unique about those long jams. The 20-minute thing is, of course, very arbitrary, but that's the bar
But
that
it's
we have.
something it's very valued in the community.
Yeah.
Something like that. I
Yeah.
do also think last year the 15 to 19-minute jams, I think there were a lot more notable ones and a lot stronger ones. Like the San Francisco Carini is 19. So that one doesn't hit the 20-minute threshold, but it's one of the best jams of last year.
I'd like to pick up on
Yeah.
that point and carry that, because I think that speaks to a lot of what we have in our larger doc, and it speaks to something I was wondering throughout the year. I saw a lot of really good 15 to 19-minute jams in the 7 shows that I saw through Alpine and Dick's. But I wonder, either in the moment or listening back, what was missing from them, because there are a lot of like 15 to 19-minute jams I listened to from 2021, the Carini, the Hershey Ruby Waves, um, Sigma
Chula
Oasis
Piper.
from Dick's, the Chula Piper, that like contained so many ideas in such a short amount of time that I was like literally just awestruck, both either in attendance or listening back. And I feel in a sense like so much of where Fish's sound is right now and Fish's jamming style is rooted in when does Trey go to the Jedi pedal and when does Trey go to like the synth pedal and that sound that he comes with, which
Yeah.
in 2021 felt like a defining aspect, similar to like when he would go to the wah pedal in 1997.
Yeah.
And now it feels in a sense like, I don't want to say like we've already been here before, like why are you still doing this? Because like they're obviously still interested in this sound, but it doesn't feel like it's changing the dynamic of a jam. It feels as though it's like leading them down a pathway that they've already walked down before. And
Mm-hmm.
so they're in this strange place of like, and this is my interpretation, they're in the strange place of the music isn't as cutting edge, it's still really good, but they kind of have to reside in a territory where things are cutting edge for it to be like as good as it can possibly be. And when they're not, when they're kind of just going back towards like a well-worn path, they either need a break or they need like to just cut bait and do something completely different. And I feel like their cut bait and do something completely different was, well, let's just segue into a new song and see what we find there. And throughout the tour, like they kept going back to that synth pedal sound that's
Mm-hmm.
great, but like is ultimately a sound kind of rooted in last year.
Yeah, well, we talked about in the spring, I think on one of the Orange Beach recaps, we talked about, is that a crush? And no, I think in the spring, I don't think it was. Is it now? Maybe. But also, it's not the first time Trey has had a pedal as like sort of a crutch or something he just goes to when he wants to kind of extend the jam. We had the wah pedal in 97, we had the whale call in early 3.0, we had delay for, a number of years where he would just hit that. So it's going to take time for him to find his next idea, but that's so like it shifts a jam very aggressively when he hits that pedal. And so I think that's still something he knows he can go to whenever he wants to like move it somewhere or get it going in the next direction. I think Page is also trying to explore some different sounds on his synths without using the exact same sounds that he was using last year. Listening to his synth playing from 2019 to 2021 is incredibly different. But last year to this year, is there that much of a difference in their sonic palette? And I think that's something that maybe they're struggling with a little bit now, trying to find what the next step is with their current gear.
Well, so I want to follow up on that, Ryan, because I have another like point to bring up. But one of our listeners or viewers, Savage 1005, which is probably his real name, his or her real name. He mentions listening, and I just or he or she, sorry, they. You're a musician. Do you think it's about like communication? Like when you see the difference between a Deer Creek Sand and like a 9-minute jam that kind of goes into something else. Like, how big of a role do you think communication plays in that?
I mean, obviously, it's a huge role and a huge part of this, and I actually think why people may be feeling that is because Trey's playing this year has kind of sneakily been really, really strong, despite the fact that maybe jams aren't going as long as people would want all the time and weird set list calls, whatever. For the most part, what I've heard, Trey has really been on it. Like in the spring at Dick's, I was just like kind of blown away by how strong and assertive his playing was, and something like the Dick's Wave of Hope is 9 minutes. But it's just like Trey going absolutely nuts for 9 minutes. Like, so maybe, coming off of the last number of years where Trey's playing, last year obviously being the exception, but, sort of like 2016 to 2019, where maybe Trey's playing wasn't the strongest, so maybe he was hanging back a little bit more. He's been a lot more out front this year, I think. Then again, we have this kind of lens over last year where it's like, oh, it's 2021, first year after the pandemic, whatever. I think it will be viewed differently, not in a negative way, but people will notice things like that about 2021, in a couple of years when you have more distance from that time. But I think, we're not used to modern era Trey being this assertive and this strong in his playing, I don't think. So that's kind of
I
a
agree.
surprise to some people.
Yeah, I agree. I think especially the summer. Like it feels like between the spring and summer, he's like a lot more aggressive playing, which I think is great, especially live. Like when you're there, it's just like why wouldn't you want that?
Yeah.
It's amazing. Brian, were you gonna say something? Sorry.
I know. I mean, I think I would just to add to that. I think that adds an aspect of this year that if we get away from the idea of jam lengths, it gets us into things like the creativity in, say, Golgi apparatuses throughout the year. That was one of my kind of standout moments when, they're just extending the song by, I don't know, 30 seconds, but they're adding something to a song that has been as standard of a Fish song as you could possibly get for the majority of their career. I don't say standard as an insult, just like when you hear Golgi, you know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
And for the first time ever, you're hearing them expand on that. I don't think that that's happening if Trey isn't feeling as confident as he sounded throughout the entire year. I think you mentioned the Wave of Hope. I think the Piper from Dix was a really great example of this, of just moments where I think the Gada Jabu from Alpine Valley, moments that like don't totally stand out as you're putting that on your year-end pedestal of like, this is one of the greatest moments of 2022, but they're like the little moments that make up the year and define what it is. So I definitely agree with that.
Yeah. And
I
you get
think,
things like, I don't know if I've mentioned this on a podcast or just talking to people outside of things, but I think the band also this year, part of weird songs getting jammed out is them, again, not wanting to stagnate. They're like, well, what happens if we throw a jam in sample regularly? Like, is that going to push us to a different place than we get when we jam out Tweezer every time? Or something like at Blossom when they jammed out the ending of Free instead of the middle. It's like, well, what happens if we just extend there? Like, that's something we've never done before. And so that's a really unique thing about this year. You mentioned, like, obviously that jam is going to be on people's pedestals, but the fact that it's the end and not the middle, I feel like that's not, at the forefront of everyone's mind. Like, that's a really interesting thing. And, we're finally seeing AC/DC Bags slowly starting to do something again, a couple of times this summer. And Gumbo, was 10 minutes once. And and Hallie's is getting jammed out on a fairly regular basis at this point. Like they're trying new things, whether it's they're looking back 25 years and being like, oh, we used to play a 25-minute Gumbo, like why did we ever stop doing that? Or they're just, because Trey doesn't seem to remember anything they did in the past. If he's just like, what happens if we jam this out? Because something like the Blossom Free was very clearly planned at Set Breaker before the show. Like they all did it at the same time. It wasn't like a Trey keeps going or. So it's interesting to look at it from that perspective.
And the You Enjoy Myself after the vocal jam and jammed out Fluff Head and like those things that you're not expecting. That's like a real amazing leap forward in this year. I think it's incredible.
can I ask a question based on, I have information on the doc here that our listeners and viewers don't have, and I want to utilize this to ask a question. Ryan, you're making a very astute point here around taking old songs that the band has played similarly for so many years and adding something new to them. RJ, do you think that the lack of new material had anything to do with your feelings around this overall tour, or do you think that was replicated by the fact that they're taking old songs and figuring out new ways to play them?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a good way to explain it. I think what you just said. I think especially for Trey, like we've seen in the years where we see big leaps forward, there's typically new material. And I don't have like all the statistics in front of me, but even just like thinking about when Blaze On or No Men or Mercury or any of these songs that were introduced in the past, 6 or 7 years, like those, they just provide new palettes for them
Hmm.
to play around, and I just think that's like something that we see these leaps forward when there is new material, and I think it motivates. I mean, it clearly motivates Trey. He's always creating new material, and we basically got no new material this summer, which I think is pretty amazing to me. I know that Tom and Trey have been writing, not as often as they would have liked probably, but there is new material in the works, I'm sure. But just to see the fact that there's, I don't know, like the summer 2015, which is different because there was Fare Thee Well and there was a lot of other stuff in there. But when No Men and Blazon and all kinds of other songs, Mercury and others debuted, and then you see these amazing jams that don't necessarily happen in those songs, but I think they help push the whole thing forward. So the lack of that is just really surprising to me.
Interesting, because you look at a year like 2019, which has them introducing Castle Vox and Ghost of the Forest. I feel like that was too much. Like you look at the set list, like they're just absolutely inundated with those songs. Like they're everywhere in weird spots. Like they're trying to figure it out. And this year, they've been kind of slowly and weirdly incorporating some Sci-Fi Soldier songs into the set list. Like not all of them. The Howling has been played way more times than the rest. And so I feel like there is a little bit of new material, but like last year there wasn't. There was, a handful of songs from Trey's from Lonely Trip, and that was right. So I don't know if the lack of new material is a drawback of this year. I feel like there is some, and I feel like I was definitely a little bit worried after seeing what happened in 2019 about like, oh, are these Sci-Fi Soldier songs going to pop up in the middle of the second set and be 5 minutes long? So I feel like the material debate can kind of go either way. You have that example like 2015 where they have these really strong to debut, and then did I cut out for a sec?
We can hear
You're
you.
back.
Okay. 2015 you have these really strong songs that debut. In 2019 you have some that maybe aren't as strong. So depends.
Yeah, I do think at this point though, you have to treat 2021 as just like its own thing.
Yeah, its own category.
Yeah.
Kind of like separate it.
We're back in 3.0 now.
Yeah,
4.0
exactly.
was 2021.
Yeah, but no, it's a good point. It's a good point. And 2019 was like there was, About to Run, and there were some songs that were introduced into the catalog from Ghost of the Forest, of course, and I think that pushed it forward. But there was also, yeah, it was a lot. So I don't know, maybe writing 2021 and then like just based on wanting to be back out there and getting the hang of it again. Maybe that's different. I don't know. Brian, what do you think about all that?
Can I propose something like deeply controversial?
Oh boy.
Please.
I guess
Thank
so.
you. I think that they need to do what they did at the start of 1997 and call a bunch of songs and basically say these 40 songs are just not in the rotation for the foreseeable future. And honestly, I would say a lot of those songs should be old classics, because I think the challenge that the band has put themselves in, and this is a good thing, but I think the challenge they've put themselves in is, the early part of 3.0, there's 6 new songs debuted. I don't know. There's the Joy songs, and then there's nothing, really debuted. They play My
Dr.
Problem
Gable.
Right There, Dr. Gable like 3 times. They debut Steam in 2011. I believe that's the only new song debuted in 2011. And then 2013, we get this, awakening where the Wingsuit show happens. Obviously, everybody complains, or some people complain, but we get suddenly 12 new Fish songs, and we get a new Fish album. And then next year for Halloween, we get 10 new Fish songs. And then we get all the songs in early 2015. And then we get Big Boat songs. And then even when they're about to do the Baker's Dozen, they debut 4 or 5 new songs, some of which have become classics. 2018, we get 2019, we get Ghost of the Forest and Casual Vox songs being interspersed. And then 2021 and 2022, we get these new songs. We've gotten like, I don't know, 100 new songs in 10 years, but like Fish's actual performances compared to where they were at in the 90s when we got a ton of new songs throughout that period in time,
Hmm.
uh, has shrunk. We get like 40 shows a year. So we're in this very weird place where like every show seems to need to have some classic songs to anchor itself down, but then it needs space for new songs. And those new songs, when they find a pathway out of them, thinking everything's right, Set Your Soul Free, Soul Planet, those start to dominate set lists. But you have, songs like Mole that is debuted, has great performances, but was played maybe 2 or 3 times throughout the summer tour. If you include the spring, you get a song like Halfway to the Moon that has like a jamming moment this summer. But like even that song, I don't have the stats right in front of me. I could look it up, but like I think it has under 60 performances all time and it debuted back in 2010. Like a lot of these songs are still in the places where Fish songs were at 1 or 2 years after their debut back in the 1990s. And obviously the band's not going to play more shows, but to
Hmm.
me, like I had a great time on Friday night at Dick's. It's one of my favorite shows I've ever been in attendance for. The rain was awesome. We got to hang out in our seats. There was a naked dude. There was like what looked like a couple coming together midway through the field with lightning all around us. And then the band came out and played like a 2 hour heavy hits killer show. But like, I don't think I'll ever go back and listen to it because it won't be able to recreate it in the moment. And there's better versions of Carini, You Enjoy Myself, Ghost,
Yeah.
Tweezer, elsewhere. To me, the most interesting things I heard throughout the summer, both in attendance and not, were new songs. And were moments where the band was saying, here's Set Your Soul Free deep in the second set at Bethel. And it's going to be one of the wildest jams that we've ever played off of it. Here is Don't Doubt Me in the second set at Dick's night one, and we're going to take a jam out of it. I don't know. To me, like they, the new songs are where the excitement is at, and they should
Yeah.
trim away some of the fat and just focus on that.
Well, yeah. I
Well,
mean, looking at my current top 10 jams of the year, I have 3 Set Your Soul Frees and 1 Wave of Hope, and then a Nomad. So like only half my list are songs debuted before 2015, which
Yeah.
is interesting there. Like, yeah, the new song point is interesting. And Halfway to the Moon, I looked, has 48 plays since 2010, which, yeah, interesting. I do think, though, the drawback to calling a bunch of songs, it worked well in 1997. I don't know if Trey could handle doing that at this point. I think he's just so excited all the time that he would just like, okay, we're not going to play Tweezer until next year. Then he'd play it like 2 shows later because he's like, oh, I want to play Tweezer, whatever, I don't care.
well,
So and then also you might end up with something like 1996 where the Billy Breathe songs are just everywhere and like in places that they really shouldn't be in the shows. And so do you want to risk that versus a 1997 thing?
so one thing that I think one thing, Brian, one trade-off that you didn't mention, but it's part of what you're describing, is that they're also trying to play some of these classic songs really well, which is awesome. But
It's true.
executing Fluffhead like perfectly note for note, which happened a couple times this year, like that takes a lot of time and concentration. And you
And
know,
dropping into Yem in the middle of a jam,
yeah, yeah,
that's impossible.
yeah. I mean, I think this year was the best played in terms of like their actual compositional playing in a long time. And so I think that's a trade-off though, because you can't do everything. You can't be
Right.
doing what you guys are describing, which is one of my favorite things. Like everything's right is like the best representation to me of like where this band is right now. Just because it's going to go out there, the lyrics are good, the tempo is right. It's got this like it's a great template for a jam. But if they're also trying to let's make sure that we play this punch you in the eye note for note, like it's gonna something else has to give.
Totally.
So yeah, did we touch on everybody's themes because we have to get into our recommended shows.
Yes.
I think so. Without like outwardly identifying them, I think we got to all of our themes here. I think the only thing that we need to say is, as just to give her a shout out, as Megan described this year, space funk, segues, and jams made of deconstructing melodies. I think that there's a lot to that. I think that if you listen back to this year, there's a lot of, I think it's all embodied in a very specific second set, which I think we will talk about here when we recommend shows. But there's a lot of space funk, there's a lot of great segues, and there's jams in with deconstructing melodies where they find an idea and then they figure out a way to deconstruct. And that to me is like the best part of this year.
I really like this year. I think someone's going to yell at me that I was too critical, which is the opposite of what people usually say. So I guess that can be fine. But
Yeah, I
there's
was
so
thinking
much
about
to go
that.
back
I
to.
was thinking about that a few minutes ago. We've been way too critical on this year so far in this discussion. I just want to say that I absolutely loved this year so far and the jams that we've gotten out of it. Like some of my favorite, fish I've heard in a while. Like, we'll talk about it in the show recommendations, but some of the stuff from this summer is just ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, let's get.
We do need a
let's do
cheese
it.
analogy,
But
though.
A cheese analogy?
I think that I would describe this year as a Munster cheese.
Oh,
It's not going to be like the cheese that everybody reaches for. Someone's going to say, "Hey, you can put this on your sandwich." You're going to be like, "Eh." But then it's going to go on your sandwich or it's going to go on your cheeseburger, and you're going to be really satisfied. And that's how I feel about a lot of this year. I was really satisfied without being blown away.
okay, so Brian, before we get into
that was impressive.
this, but before, that was actually.
Did you have that prepared? Like what?
I wish I could have stole Scott Ricard's joke. That would be really good. Brian, can you tell us before we get into our show recommendations about Sunset Lake CBD?
I absolutely can. You know that we are sponsored and we love our friends over at Sunset Lake CBD. Their line of smokable hemp products are for the old deadhead like Ryan Storm or the young fish fan like RJB, who's searching for a mellow body high. Smoking CBD has all the benefits of high THC cannabis without the paranoia or the anxious side effects. With 9 different strains from this year's harvest, there is something for everyone. Hawaiian Haze is awesome for an outdoor show, and Cherry Abacus is best for the end of the night. All the flowers grown, cured, and trimmed by Sunset Lake CBD farmers. And even better, Sunset Lake's farm-to-table approach gets you great pricing on premium CBD flower by shipping it directly from their farm to your door. Look, all I'm going to say is second sets would start at Dick's, and I would light up a joint of the Hawaiian Haze, and I would pass it to my wife, and she would pass it to me, and I'd pass it to my friend Sam, and he would take it, and then he would pass it to someone next to him, and they would take it, and he would say, "Hey, it's CBD," and they'd be like, "Oh, I'm okay," and we'd be like, "You know what? We're in our own little happiness bubble over here. I don't have any anxiety. I don't have any paranoia. I'm just floating right now. I feel so good." And I'd explain this to them. And then they'd say, "Okay, can I have it now
Wow,
so
are
that you
you
stop talking to me?"
sponsored?
And they would have some and they'd be like, "Look, I have no anxiety. I have no paranoia, and Fish is on stage and everything is good." So share it with your concert pals. Check them out today. SunsetLakeCBD.com and use coupon code HFPod for 20% off all products. Again, that's Sunset Lake CBD, farmer owned, Vermont grown.
I really don't think I've ever heard anyone sell Sunset or sell anything the way that you guys sell Sunset Lake. So it's impressive.
See, that's a testimonial right there. I hope the Sunset Lake folks are listening.
What do they say? Sell what you're passionate about, and you'll never sell a thing in your life. Sunset Lake is just everything to us. We love it.
That's true. That applies to that's a good lesson. Okay, so we're gonna turn it around here, and we're gonna be effusive in our praise of 2022 summer by talking about a couple shows. Should we save Megan's for the end?
Yeah, let's keep hers to the end because she stole the best spots.
I know, right? I went and I looked at what she had chosen, and I was like, oh, I wanted that.
Okay, so Brian, do you want to go first?
Yeah. I have 2 very different shows, one of which I think is the second strongest show of the overall tour, and the other of which I think is just like the defining reasons for why I love this tour, even in spite of me being slightly critical at times. Bethel Night 2 is my first one, 723. I think this is a outstanding show. The first set is a ton of fun. You've got a great Undermine jam. You've got a great Ghost jam to close things out. Evening Song opens the show. One of my favorite new songs that the band debuted in late 2019. Set Your Soul Free, as Ryan was discussing, I think is one of the absolute best jams, if not the best jam of the overall year, and a really, really classic encore. And then the other show I have is Alpine Valley Night 2. This is probably more so attendance bias than anything, but this is one of my favorite shows I've ever attended. The weather was perfect. There was like a Midwestern chill. It started raining midway through the first set. They played Petrichor, opened up with 1999 into Fluffhead, really cool Leaves jam into Get Back on the Train. Backwards on the Number Line with jam at the end of that. Great Mr. Completely. And this really interesting end to the show that on paper looks like such a boring walk through the end of the show. But when you listen to it, there's so much in these songs. And I have no idea what made them choose these songs to close out the show. But however they did it and what the music that they injected into songs like Undermine, About to Run, Blaze On towards the end of the show, it somehow worked. And I love these two shows, both from experience as well as from listening from afar.
I went to night 1 of Alpine with you, Brian, and I was a little bit sad that I didn't see night 2 instead. Like if I had been able to magically switch those two, the 1999 Fluffhead, what an amazing start, and then this Petrichor I thought was great. The whole thing was just a really, really good show. I think I said this on the recap or maybe on another episode. The Bethel Night 2 is a show that I think will stand the test of time. I'm not that into these like the Tease Fest sets, unless it's Tweezer. That's the one exception. And
I know
in
you're
fact,
about to contradict yourself.
I'll just say I'll recommend Man Night 1 for that exact reason. But I don't know, like there's a lot to choose from, like you said before, Ryan. I mean, there's some amazing sets in this tour. Both nights of the Man I really enjoyed, but the first night of the Man, more into Tweezer to open the second set is just, for me, that's all I need. But Halley's Comet jammed out in the first set. There's some great stuff there, but Tweezer, Cities, Tweezer, Passing Through, Isabella, Tweezer, Mercury, Piper, Tweezer, 2001, Character Zero. Is just what a fun, amazing night. I also think MPP Night 2 is another one. I had a great time. Both of these were shows I was at. Surprisingly, another Tweezer set. But I thought from the beginning, like the Wave of Hope opener was really strong, and I had great seats that night. I thought that show was really good, and I think both the shows I mentioned are slightly underrated, more so Merriweather Night 2 than Philly Night 1, but those are my two. Ryan, what do you got?
Yeah, I have. So the third night of Atlantic City. This may be a little bit of bias on my part because it was one of two shows that I was able to webcast this summer, thanks to a very well-timed day off from camp on this Sunday night. Shout out to my amazing girlfriend who sat and watched me webcast this show while we were on a day off together. But I really, really loved this really strong tube in the first set. The first set was just really, really great overall. Still no jam out of Mercury for some reason. I don't know why they've been doing that this year, but I'm not.
You're expecting it for sure.
I'm not a fan of this removal of the jam. It's so good. Like, it's a waste. But that aside, great first set. Very well executed Fluffhead. And this Carini that closes the first set, it is so short. But like Trey during this jam is just, as I said, confident this year, kind of like the Dick's Wave of Hope. It's just like 8 or 9 minutes of Trey just absolutely destroying everything in his path. And I listened to it again earlier today, and oh my God, like if you haven't gone back to this Carini in a while, spend 10 minutes, listen to it. It's really crazy good. then classic Mike's Groove to open the second set, and then this Wave of Hope Yem segment here, like late second set, it feels like almost at this point, but like this Wave of Hope is phenomenal, as it was whenever it jammed this year. You know, then they, as I said before, they pivot into Yem mid jam. How do you do that? That's like,
it was amazing.
How do you do that? And then, you know, this Yem jam kind of picks up right where Wave of Hope left off in the second jam, just triumphant, amazing. So it just, you know, and then the rest of the show was Susie waiting. First two, but like really, really underrated show, I think, from this summer in this one.
I think you're right. That was my wife. My wife and I saw, I think, 4 or 5 shows together this summer, and that was definitely her favorite segment of the whole summer, I think, was that Wave of Hope. You Enjoy Myself. I mean, it's like 45 minutes almost, and it's it was very powerful and really fun, and really, that's a great pick for sure.
And then my other pick is Hartford, which, you know, yes, it suffers a little bit from there not really being much substance outside of the Sigma, Wave of Hope, Song I Heard the Ocean Sing, Blaze On, but the strength of those jams alone make it one of the best shows of the year. Like that Sigma is phenomenal. The Wave of Hope is, you know, I think it's my second or third favorite jam of the year right now. It's absolutely incredible. And then that Song I Heard the Ocean Sing goes to so many different unique places. I think that song's really underutilized as a jam vehicle most of the time. We've had a couple of really strong versions this year. That one, Mexico, come to mind. And then that Blaze On is just a really, really nice follow-up to it as well. But really incredibly strong segment there, you know, that I revisit all the time.
That segment is, I think, as close as the band got to hitting what made 2021 so special, in that Wave of Hope around 15 minutes reaches this very Brian Eno MSG Tweezer type of space that it's just kind of lingering. It's gorgeous music. It's kind of spacious. It's really mysterious. And then it continues on for another 6 or 7 minutes. There's a ton of really cool exploration. As you noted, the Song I Heard the Ocean Sing, it's like a sneaky 19 minutes. Like it's, you don't, like, you go back and listen to it and you're like, oh my God, like there's so much happening here. And then the Blaze On is 13 minutes and it goes into this very subdued, it's just a ton of diverse and unique jamming in there. I think that 45 minutes or so, that may be the peak of the year for me, but we do need to give the nod to our fallen pitcher. She'll be back for the NLCS. We know this. RJ, do you want to have the honors of reading Megan's picks? She didn't follow the rules. She said she did 3 picks.
That's why she broke the rules and then didn't show up, and then she didn't get in trouble for breaking the rules.
Exactly. The first, one of the 3 that she recommended was Raleigh, which I got to see with Megan, and that was a great show. The Rise come together, of course, to end the first set, but the Steam in the first set was really fun, and I got my friend I took was with me. We met up with Megan, but I was with my friend Jim, who'd seen 2 Fish shows before this, so I was kind of explaining to him what was going on. And during the Steam, I was like, this is not normal, and really cool, you know. And then the Rise.
How do you explain the Rise come together?
I mean, I think right after the last verse ended, it was like, this is gonna be wild, you know.
What did you say to him when the song started versus when the jam started?
I said a lot of people are gonna be pissed about this song, and then I thought they would close with like Antelope or something, you know. But you know, the second set of this is, I think, a good example of the counter argument that I made earlier. Like, you have the Carini, which is 16 minutes, Ruby Waves is 13 minutes, and then Sea of Stars, and then an 11-minute Piper, pretty short Light, and then Shine a Light, and then a 4-song encore, which was just, I think it was just really a fun night. But also, I think the show holds up re-listening for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the other one is AC Night 1. I think AC Night 1 is probably, do you think it's like pretty unanimously up in the top 3 of 100% of the tour? That's the one show that I didn't see, which is great. But really,
don't go to the show that RJ is going to.
Exactly. basically. AC Night One is there. There's a lot. There's a lot to it, but I mean, I think another monster Sigma Oasis jam, another like Big Down with Disease, Ruby Waves, and the Ghost Hood to close. It's solid all the way around.
Yeah, that was a show that I think similar to what I was saying with the Hartford, the opening part of the second set. The Atlantic City night one was the closest thing to, okay, we are at a top tier like echelon moment of the summer tour where everything is kind of connecting around set list, jamming, the flow of the overall show. Close friend of mine was there and just kept texting throughout the whole show. Whoa. Like wouldn't say anything else, just like every couple of minutes, just like texted whoa. And I was on my couch and I was like, I feel you, man. Like the way that the lights were going during the disease, there was so much there. And that second set, you get two massive new songs, Soul Planet, Ruby Waves, around Disease, Ghost, and Hood. Like that is the perfect mix of new and old to really inspire the band.
Well, Megan's last pick is the one show that Brian said he's probably not going to listen back to, which is the second night of Dicks.
Rain show.
And it's an interesting. I mean, like you said, Brian, being there, I'm sure was. I had a big argument with a couple of friends via text message, where I was like, they were like, that was the best set of Fish in a long time, and I tried to explain that I hadn't listened to it because I was in the woods in New Hampshire, but my point was like, if you look at it on paper, especially with like the song timings, you might be like, okay, that's like sort of like a Fenway sort of thing, where you get one long set and they kind of like play a bunch of songs. But listening back to it, there is a lot. I mean, the Carini You Enjoy Myself combo at the beginning is just it hits really hard. And Brian, the way you described being there, it seems like it was a ton of fun. The Tweezer's great, and there's a lot going on there that I think the set list doesn't reflect. So I feel like some of our biases, or mine at least, about some of the numbers that we talked about earlier are proven wrong when you go back and listen to some of these shows. But it seems like that was a pretty special show to be at.
It was great being there, and I think that to come out and say pretty much all of our big songs are going to be played tonight in one long set was the right move to make. I think they've learned a lot about how to play these single set shows, and that was, I think, the peak of it to this point in time. But yeah, I mean, sitting at home on the couch versus being there, like I think you would have had a great time watching that live no matter what.
So guys, we did a good run through. I feel like you said, Ryan, maybe we were a little too critical at the beginning, but that's why we're here to bring our honest opinions to this forum. But I can't wait to see Fish again. That's my main conclusion.
Me too. I did want to ask one more question for us. If you guys have, a couple of jams that were outside any of the shows we just talked about from the summer. So from like kind of an overlooked show, just, one or two jams from any shows this summer that we did not just talk about in our favorite picks. Like what would you guys go for?
I think we have not mentioned night one of Jones Beach, and that has The Leaves that I think is one of the best performances of the entire summer. And I would say also we haven't mentioned, and I don't think the fan base has mentioned at all since it happened, the Toronto show. And the theme from the bottom in set one and the sample into Disease in set two. Maybe it was coming off of the AC weekend and the one show midweek before we move into Alpine, and we could sense the beginning of the end of the tour. Whatever it may have been, people I think overlooked that show, myself included, and I would go back and listen to those segments from Toronto as well as from Jones Beach. What about you, RJ?
I think the Bangor Down with Disease is like quite an adventure.
We haven't talked about it today somehow.
Yeah, it's really just incredible. And then a show that I was at the first night of Alpine, the MoMA Dance, was it was so fun and unexpected. Even though MoMA Dance is jam, but it just like at that point in the show to go in that direction was pretty awesome. I think like a late first set, really long MoMA Dance is not what I was expecting going into that show. Ryan, do you have some
Yeah, for me, it's that Jones Beach Leaves. Brian mentioned like that. Definitely one of my favorite jams of the year. I never needed you like this before. Also, before that, great jam. We kind of touched on the Blossom Free a little bit. That one, the Banger Disease. Like, these are crazy jams that maybe popped up in shows that aren't as high profile, say. But yeah, like everywhere you look this summer, you're gonna find really good jams. Whether there's a show where nothing really went over like 13 or 14 minutes, those shorter ones are still gonna have a lot, to dig into, I think. We automatically gravitate towards like, oh, a 25-minute jam. But as we've mentioned, there's so much packed into these shorter ones as well that, we shouldn't be overlooking.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I should have. I think I should maybe caveated my first theme about the length of jams by saying like, this is why people are saying what they're saying about the tour. That's where that stuff comes through, and I do think it translates pretty directly to like what you hear people saying about these shows. All right, Ryan, will you come back and can join us again soon?
Absolutely, I would love to.
All right. Before we go, we want to tell you we do have a campaign going. We're just trying to spread the word about Fans for Racial Equity, who I think everyone knows about at this point. They're seeking to build an anti-racist live music scene and promoting liberation through racial equity in the world by activating the collective power of our community. It's really it's fansforracialequity.org, fans with a PH, of course. You can get involved in free education, outreach, community partnership programs. They're great. A bunch of my friends volunteer for them, and I think they're awesome. So if you don't know about free, you should check them out.
They do have a table at most shows as well.
Yeah, they do. They do, and maybe if Fish plays another show, they will be there. Maybe we'll be there too. Who knows?
Who knows if Fish will play another show?
Who knows? Let's hope, because I would really like to.
I need an announcement.
I would really like to go see Fish again.
A couple more weeks, and I'm booking a hotel in Cincinnati for me.
The threat is out.
The threat. All right. Thank you, guys. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Ryan, and thanks to everyone for tuning in on listening or viewing. We appreciate it.
Thank you
and we'll see you guys soon.
Thanks,
Ryan.
everyone.